Thomas sat in his small, cluttered study, the flickering lamplight casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. The coded message, a single sheet of paper torn from Elias's notebook, lay spread before him. Each symbol, each seemingly random arrangement of letters, held a terrifying truth. It was Elias, his brilliant, eccentric brother, trapped in the clutches of the Nazi regime. His words, though cryptic, painted a grim picture. A heavily guarded research facility in occupied France, where he was being held against his will, forced to work on a project of immense importance to the Nazi war effort. Thomas reread the message, his heart pounding in his chest. Elias had always been a man of science, driven by a thirst for knowledge and a desire to unravel the mysteries of the universe. His disappearance months ago had been a devastating blow to Thomas, a gaping hole in his life. Now, this chilling message confirmed the worst fears. His brother was not simply missing. He was a prisoner, a pawn in a dangerous game. The weight of responsibility settled upon Thomas like a heavy cloak. He, a mild-mannered schoolteacher, the epitome of normalcy, was now thrust into a world of espionage and intrigue. He had to act, and act quickly. The message contained a sliver of hope, a rendezvous point, a clandestine meeting place in a neutral country bordering France. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was their only chance. Thomas knew he couldn't simply walk into the Nazi-occupied territory. He needed a disguise, a new identity. He spent days poring over maps, studying the intricate network of roads and rail lines crisscrossing Europe. He learned about the black market, the underground networks that thrived in the shadow of war. He gathered meager supplies, essential items that could help him survive the perilous journey ahead. He forged documents, creating a new identity for himself, a fictional persona that would allow him to blend in. He packed a small bag with the bare necessities, a change of clothes, a few essential toiletries, and a tattered copy of Elias's favorite book, a worn-out volume of poetry. He left behind his life in Oakhaven, his cozy cottage, his beloved bookshelves, the familiar faces of his students and colleagues, all of it fading into a distant memory. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the sleepy town, Thomas slipped out of his home, his heart heavy with a mixture of fear and determination. He walked towards the train station, his footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. He knew that this journey would be fraught with danger, but he was driven by an unwavering love for his brother, a burning desire to bring him home. The train rattled and swayed, carrying Thomas deeper into the heart of Europe. He watched the landscape blur past, the familiar fields and villages replaced by desolate landscapes scarred by war. He felt a growing sense of unease, a constant awareness of the danger that lurked around every corner. He kept his eyes peeled, scanning the faces of his fellow passengers, searching for any sign of suspicion. He arrived at his destination, a small, bustling town on the border of occupied France. The air was thick with tension, the streets teeming with refugees and soldiers. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of excitement and fear. He had reached the rendezvous point, the first step in his perilous journey to rescue his brother. He had no idea what awaited him, but he was determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He found the contact, a weathered old man with piercing blue eyes and a gruff demeanor. The man listened intently to Thomas's story, his face betraying no emotion. He nodded curtly, handing Thomas a crumpled piece of paper. It was a map, a crudely drawn sketch of the research facility, marked with hidden entrances and security checkpoints. The old man spoke in hushed tones, his words laced with caution. "The facility is heavily guarded," he warned. "They have snipers, search dogs, and a network of informants. You must be careful, very careful." He paused, his gaze fixed on Thomas's face. "Your brother's life depends on it." The biting wind whipped through the cobblestone streets of Paris, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and the distant rumble of artillery fire. Thomas, his face weathered by weeks on the road, pulled his threadbare coat tighter around himself, seeking a meager respite from the relentless chill. He had arrived in the city a week ago, a ghost drifting through the shadows, his every move a calculated risk. Paris, once a vibrant tapestry of culture and life, now bore the scars of war, its beauty marred by the pervasive fear that clung to the air like a shroud. He sought out a contact, a name whispered in hushed tones within the resistance network, Anya. A woman of enigmatic allure, she was said to possess a network of informants and a keen understanding of the city's underbelly. Thomas found her in a dimly lit cafe, tucked away in a labyrinthine alley. She was a striking figure, her porcelain skin framed by a cascade of raven hair, her emerald eyes radiating both intelligence and a hint of melancholy. Anya greeted him with a warm smile that did little to mask the steely glint in her eyes. Her voice, a soft melody tinged with a faint French accent, was both soothing and unsettling. "You are Thomas, brother of Elias?" she inquired, her gaze unwavering. Thomas nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had traveled far, endured untold hardships, all for this moment. "I need your help," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I need to reach my brother." Anya's smile widened, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Elias is in danger," she said, her voice grave. "The Nazis are desperate to exploit his research. It is a weapon of unimaginable power, capable of turning the tide of the war." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "But there are others who seek to control it, forces even more sinister than the Nazis themselves." Thomas listened, his mind reeling. The stakes were higher than he had imagined. His brother's research was not just a scientific breakthrough. It was a key to the fate of the world. "What can I do?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. Anya's gaze seemed to pierce through him, reading his every thought, every fear. "You must be careful," she warned. "The path ahead is fraught with danger. Trust no one, least of all those who claim to be your allies." The following days were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings and whispered conversations. Anya guided Thomas through the labyrinthine streets of Paris, introducing him to members of the resistance network. He learned of their daring exploits, their unwavering commitment to freedom, and the heavy price they paid for their defiance. He discovered that Anya was not just a contact. She was a leader, a strategist, and a woman of immense courage. One evening, as they walked through a deserted park, a patrol of Nazi soldiers emerged from the shadows, their boots crunching on the gravel path. Anya's eyes widened, her hand instinctively reaching for a hidden pistol. She pulled Thomas behind a towering oak tree, her voice a hushed whisper. "Stay quiet," she hissed, her breath ragged. "Don't move." The soldiers marched past, their voices echoing in the stillness of the night. As they disappeared around the corner, Anya let out a sigh of relief. "They almost caught us," she murmured, her voice laced with tension. "We need to be more careful." But a seed of doubt had been planted in Thomas's mind. Why had Anya taken such a risk? Why had she exposed them to danger? He knew that the resistance was constantly under threat, but Anya's actions seemed calculated, deliberate. Later that night, as Thomas sat alone in his makeshift quarters, he examined the cipher Elias had used in his coded message. He had been trying to decipher it for weeks, but it remained stubbornly elusive. But now, as he stared at the intricate symbols, a new understanding began to dawn on him. He noticed a subtle pattern, a repetition of certain symbols that seemed to form a hidden message. He worked feverishly, his mind racing, his fingers flying across the page. As the hours passed, the hidden message slowly revealed itself. It was a warning, a chilling revelation that sent shivers down his spine. Elias had discovered a traitor within the resistance, someone who was feeding information to the Nazis. The realization hit Thomas like a thunderbolt. He had been so focused on rescuing his brother, he had failed to see the danger lurking in the shadows. The biting wind whipped at Thomas's face, carrying with it the metallic tang of fear and the faint scent of diesel fuel. He crouched behind a crumbling stone wall, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The imposing research facility loomed before him, a monstrous edifice of steel and concrete, its windows like vacant eyes staring out into the night. Searchlights sliced through the darkness, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed like tormented souls. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their boots crunching on the gravel, their faces grim and unforgiving. This was no ordinary prison. It was a fortress designed to hold secrets, and Thomas, a mild-mannered schoolteacher, was about to become its most unwelcome guest. He had spent weeks meticulously studying the facility's blueprints, gleaned from whispers in back alleys and hushed conversations in smoky cafes. He knew every blind spot, every patrol route, every weak point in the elaborate security system. But knowledge was one thing. Putting it into practice was another. The weight of his mission, the desperate hope in Elias's coded message, pressed down on him like a physical burden. He had to succeed. He had to get to his brother. Under the cover of darkness, Thomas moved with the stealth of a shadow, his footsteps silent on the dew-laden grass. He slipped through a gap in the fence, his heart pounding in his chest. He was now inside the facility's outer perimeter, a maze of barbed wire and watchtowers. He knew he couldn't afford to make a sound, to draw attention to himself. He moved like a phantom, his senses heightened, his every move calculated and precise. He bypassed a guard dog slumbering beneath a flickering lamppost, its heavy breaths the only sound that dared to break the silence. He reached the main entrance, a massive steel door guarded by two burly soldiers. Their faces were hardened, their eyes alert, their hands resting on the hilts of their pistols. Thomas knew he couldn't go through the front gate. He had to find another way in. He scanned the perimeter, his eyes searching for an opening, a weakness in the fortress's defenses. He spotted a ventilation shaft, a narrow metal duct leading into the building. It was a risky move, but it was his only chance. He squeezed through the narrow opening, his body contorting into an unnatural position. The air inside the shaft was stale and dusty, thick with the smell of rust and decay. He crawled through the darkness, his heart pounding in his chest, his every sense on high alert. He could hear the distant hum of machinery, the muffled voices of guards, the clanging of metal. He was close. He could feel it. He emerged from the ventilation shaft into a dimly lit corridor, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. He found himself in a deserted hallway, the walls lined with steel lockers and framed posters of Nazi propaganda. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, a palpable tension that hung in the air like a shroud. He moved cautiously down the corridor, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He could hear voices coming from a room at the end of the hallway. He crept closer, his heart pounding in his chest. He pressed his ear against the cold metal door, listening intently. "He's still resisting," a gruff voice said. "He refuses to divulge the information. He's a stubborn one, that scientist," another voice replied. "But we'll break him. We always do." Thomas knew he had stumbled upon something important. He had to find out what was going on. He took a deep breath and slowly pushed the door open, his hand hovering over the concealed knife in his waistband. Thomas, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, pressed himself against the cold, damp wall. The metallic clang of boots echoed through the dimly lit corridor, a chilling reminder of the danger he was in. He had managed to slip past the first layer of guards, relying on the scientist's whispered intel about the facility's layout. The scientist, a gaunt man with haunted eyes, had spoken of hidden passages and unguarded access points, a lifeline for those desperate to escape the facility's clutches. He moved with the practiced stealth of a shadow, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The air hung heavy with the scent of disinfectant and something else, something faintly metallic and unsettling. He pressed his ear against the wall, straining to hear any further sounds. Silence, broken only by the distant hum of machinery, answered him. He crept forward, his eyes scanning the labyrinthine corridors. The walls were lined with steel lockers, their doors bolted shut, and the occasional flickering light bulb cast long, distorted shadows that danced across the floor. He felt a prickle of unease, a sense of being watched, even in the darkness. He rounded a corner and found himself in a vast, cavernous room. The air was thick with the smell of chemicals and the low rumble of machinery. Rows of steel tables lined the walls, each covered in a jumble of wires, tubes, and instruments. In the center of the room, a massive machine, its intricate gears and dials glowing with an eerie blue light, dominated the space. He recognized it from the scientist's fragmented descriptions, the heart of Elias's research. But something was amiss. The machine seemed to be powered down, its hum silenced. And there, chained to a table in the center of the room, was Elias. His brother, pale and gaunt, his eyes hollow and filled with a deep, unyielding fear. Thomas's heart leaped into his throat. He had found him. He was so close. But before he could move, a voice, cold and hard as steel, cut through the silence. Well, well, well. Look what the cat dragged in. A tall, imposing figure emerged from the shadows, his face obscured by a dark, wolf-like mask. He wore a crisp black uniform, adorned with the insignia of the Nazi Party. In his hand, he held a gleaming pistol. "You shouldn't be here, teacher," the figure said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "This is a place for secrets, for those who understand the true power of science." He took a step closer, his gaze fixed on Thomas. "You see, your brother's research, it's not about energy, as you might have been led to believe. It's about something far more powerful, something that could reshape the world." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. What did this mean? What was his brother's research truly about? "This," the figure continued, gesturing towards Elias, "is a weapon, a tool of unimaginable power, and the Nazis intend to wield it." He paused, his eyes burning into Thomas's soul. "But you, teacher, you have a choice. You can betray your brother, join us, and help us bring this weapon to fruition. Or you can remain loyal to him and face the consequences." Thomas's chance came in the form of Anya, a captivating woman with piercing blue eyes and a quick, enigmatic smile. She appeared as a phantom, materializing in the shadows of a smoky Parisian café, her words a whisper against the din of wartime chatter. Anya claimed to be a resistance fighter, sympathetic to Elias's plight and willing to help. She offered him a forged identity, a safe house, and a way into the facility, posing as a visiting scientist. Anya's guidance proved invaluable. She navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the facility with the grace of a seasoned spy, her knowledge of its inner workings a testament to her own clandestine activities. Thomas, cloaked in his borrowed persona, followed in her wake, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. He saw the brilliant, tortured genius of his brother in the flickering light of a laboratory, surrounded by complex equations and humming machinery. But as they delved deeper into the facility's secrets, a chilling realization began to dawn on Thomas. Anya's stories, once seemingly genuine, now held a disconcerting undercurrent of manipulation. Her casual mentions of Nazi officers, her seemingly effortless access to restricted areas, all pointed to a truth far more sinister. One evening, as they huddled in a darkened room, Anya's facade finally crumbled. Her eyes, once filled with warmth and compassion, now glinted with a cold, calculating light. She confessed her true allegiance, revealing herself as a double agent working for the Nazis. "Elias's research," she said, her voice a chilling whisper, "is the key to unlocking a weapon of unimaginable power, a weapon that could give the Nazis control over the world." Thomas's blood ran cold. The mission he had embarked on, the sacrifice he had made, had all been a carefully orchestrated deception. He had been lured into a trap, a pawn in a deadly game. Anya continued, her words a venomous serpent slithering through his mind. "The Nazis are willing to offer you a deal," she said, her tone laced with a cruel amusement. "Betray your brother, provide them with the information they seek, and you will be spared. Your life, your freedom, will be yours." Thomas stared at Anya, his mind reeling. He felt a cold hand grip his heart, squeezing the air from his lungs. He was faced with an impossible choice: betray his brother, become complicit in a monstrous plan, or risk everything to save him. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, suffocating him. He could not betray Elias, not after everything they had been through. But could he defy the Nazis? Could he escape this web of deceit without sacrificing everything? Thomas spent days observing the facility, meticulously charting guard patrols, identifying weak points in the perimeter, and studying the comings and goings of the Nazi personnel. He learned their routines, their habits, their vulnerabilities. He discovered a hidden ventilation shaft leading into the bowels of the facility, a potential entry point for a daring nighttime infiltration. He also learned about the Wolf, the ruthless SS officer in charge of the facility, a man known for his brutality and unwavering loyalty to the Nazi cause. Thomas knew that to succeed, he had to outsmart the wolf, to anticipate his every move and exploit his weaknesses. Fueled by a mixture of rage and determination, Thomas reached out to the French resistance, a network of brave individuals fighting for their country's liberation. He contacted them through a trusted intermediary, a local farmer who sympathized with the resistance's cause. The farmer, a weathered man with eyes that held the weight of years spent under Nazi occupation, listened intently to Thomas's story. He saw the desperation in Thomas's eyes, the unwavering love for his brother, and he knew he had to help. The resistance, led by a charismatic woman named Marie, agreed to assist Thomas. They had their own reasons for wanting to disrupt the Nazi operation at the facility. They knew that the wolf was using the facility to develop a terrifying new weapon, a weapon that could change the tide of the war in the Nazis' favor. Marie and her team were skilled in sabotage, infiltration, and combat. They had the resources and the expertise to support Thomas's daring plan. Together, Thomas and the resistance devised a comprehensive plan. They would stage a diversion, drawing the wolf and his guards away from the main facility, allowing Thomas to slip in unnoticed through the ventilation shaft. Once inside, he would locate Elias and free him. The resistance would then provide cover fire, creating a chaotic scene that would allow Thomas and Elias to escape. The plan was risky, audacious, and fraught with danger, but it was their only hope. The night of the operation arrived, cloaked in darkness and the ominous silence of war. Thomas, dressed in the uniform of a captured French soldier, joined the resistance fighters at their designated position. They were a motley crew, a mix of seasoned veterans and young idealists, all united by their hatred for the Nazi regime. Their faces were etched with determination, their eyes burning with a fierce resolve. Marie, her voice calm and steady, briefed them on the plan, outlining each step with meticulous detail. As the clock ticked towards midnight, the resistance launched their diversion. They attacked a nearby supply depot, triggering a firefight that drew the wolf and his guards away from the main facility. The air was filled with the deafening roar of gunfire, the acrid smell of smoke, and the screams of the wounded. The chaos was exactly what Thomas needed. He slipped into the ventilation shaft, his heart pounding in his chest, his every sense on high alert. The shaft was dark, cramped, and dusty. Thomas crawled through it, his body scraping against the rough metal walls. He could hear the distant sounds of the battle raging outside, a constant reminder of the danger he was in. He emerged into a dimly lit corridor, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. He could hear the muffled voices of Nazi guards talking in hushed tones, their words laced with fear and confusion. Thomas moved silently, his footsteps barely making a sound on the cold, hard floor. He followed the sound of voices, his senses heightened, his mind racing. He knew he was close to Elias. He could almost feel his brother's presence, a beacon of hope in the darkness. He rounded a corner and came face to face with a group of Nazi guards, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of a nearby lamp. They were huddled around a table, their faces etched with worry. Thomas froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been spotted. Thomas, drawing upon Elias's meticulous research, discovered a hidden ventilation shaft leading into the facility's bowels. It was a risky proposition, a tight squeeze through dark, dusty tunnels, but it offered his only hope. He shimmied through the shaft, his heart pounding in his chest, every rustle of metal, every creak of the aging structure sending shivers down his spine. Finally, he emerged into a dimly lit corridor, the air thick with the scent of oil and metal. He was inside. He moved cautiously, his senses heightened, listening for any sign of life. He knew he had to reach Elias's lab, a location meticulously detailed in Elias's notes. He navigated a labyrinth of corridors, past locked doors and guarded checkpoints, his every step a calculated risk. He used his ingenuity, a discarded wrench becoming a makeshift lockpick, a stray piece of cloth masking his presence in the shadows. He was a ghost, moving silently through the heart of the enemy's lair. He finally reached the lab, a sterile, brightly lit room filled with complex machinery and scientific instruments. And there, in the center of it all, was Elias, his face gaunt, his eyes weary, but his spirit unbroken. Relief washed over Thomas, a wave of pure joy so intense it almost brought him to his knees. He had found his brother, but their reunion was short-lived. A guttural voice echoed through the lab. "Ah, the prodigal brother returns." And just in time for the grand finale, a hulking figure emerged from the shadows, his face obscured by a thick fur coat, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. This was the Wolf, the notorious Nazi officer who had orchestrated Elias's capture and the development of the weapon. He gestured towards a massive, pulsating device, humming with an ominous energy. "This, my dear brothers, is the culmination of our efforts. A weapon of unparalleled power, capable of ending this war in an instant." Thomas's blood ran cold. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that this device was a ticking time bomb, a threat to the entire world. He had to stop it. But how? He glanced at Elias, his brother's eyes filled with a desperate hope. "Thomas," Elias whispered, his voice hoarse, "the control panel. There's a sequence, a specific order." Thomas's mind raced, piecing together Elias's fragmented words. His own knowledge of electronics gleaned from tinkering with his old radios. He saw a glimmer of hope, a way to disable the device, a desperate gamble. He had to act fast. He feigned a moment of hesitation, buying himself precious seconds. Then, with a burst of confidence, he lunged at the Wolf, using his brother's distraction to his advantage. The Wolf, caught off guard, stumbled back, his fur coat falling away to reveal a chillingly familiar tattoo. A wolf's head, identical to the one Thomas had seen on the Nazi officer who had interrogated him weeks ago. "You," Thomas exclaimed, recognizing his tormentor. "You're the one who—" His words were cut short as the Wolf recovered, his eyes blazing with fury. He lunged at Thomas, his fist aimed at his face. But Thomas, fueled by a surge of adrenaline, ducked, dodging the blow and landing a swift kick to the Wolf's knee. The Wolf roared in pain, his grip on the control panel loosening. Thomas seized the opportunity, his fingers flying across the panel, his mind reeling through the complex sequence Elias had whispered. He felt the surge of energy as the device sputtered and groaned, its menacing hum fading into a low whine. The Wolf, enraged, lunged at Thomas again, but just as he reached him, the device exploded in a shower of sparks and smoke, plunging the lab into darkness.